Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Join us here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first. Jason Love may be one of the most driven, successful, yet understated people on the planet. He shares some of his background in his book, Louisiana Slim, The Family. But with this book, you're just adding author to your list of accomplishments. I mean, tell us what else you're doing to keep busy.
Actor, social media influencer, model, all kind of stuff like that.
How long you been doing that?
10 years.
You're lucky, and you make your living in the entertainment field.
Yes, very hefty, yes.
Good for you. How long have you been writing?
I've been writing for about a year and a half. I probably have 5 books done, but only this is the first one I published.
In a year and a half, you wrote 5 books?
That is correct.
Wow, that's ambitious. Did you ever write before?
Well, I was very studious, so I always liked reading and writing ever since I was adolescent.
But what suddenly made you decide to write 5 books in a year and a half? That's a lot.
Oh, I guess I did well in life, and I had a lot of time on my hands, as I do now.
Is there anything from your life in this book?
It was like a facet of life in the youth, coming up in a poverty environment. You attempt to attain finances the best way you can.
So you were like your character, Louisiana Slim. You were raised in poverty?
Yes, that is correct.
And you drew on those experiences?
Yes, exactly. And the experiences around me.
All right, tell me more.
The book is about a young man from a poverty environment that was rather intelligent, but took a route because of his, upbringing and inability to attain finances. He started to dabble into what one would call the street affairs, and gathered a group of people and brought them in and made a hefty living off of it. It takes place in Louisiana. He develops how they call it, an illegal business, selling narcotics on the streets, using mathematics to increase the profit from the sales and everything, and taking that and helping people within the city who are also poor, and helping the society grow while doing these things that are considered bad. There are multiple characters in the book. They have characters that people like and characters that people will dislike, characters that people find funny, because it's FMB. It's like a family. So each person plays a different role within that organization. So we have Tila in the book. She's kind of like Louisiana Slim's love interest. She starts off as just being a worker and develops into the love interest. And she is like the face of the organization because Slim doesn't want to be known by anyone.
A worker, you mean she's on the streets selling narcotics?
Yes, that is correct. The bad guy would be Chrisville. Chrisville is also a drug dealer in the book, and he is kind of like a scumbucket. Like, he is the one that, for example, he's, how would we call him? Conniving. Like, he does anything to get ahead, and he attempts to, rob Slim and different things. Throughout the book, he's always doing something horrid. So Chrisville, he tries to set up Slim by going to the houses where Slim has the narcotics and attempts to steal it, being malicious, trying to make money at all costs. Slim finds out about it because Chrisville doesn't know that Slim is the guy. He assumes that it's Tila. So when he's asking about where Tila hides the merchandise, he's really talking to Slim. about his own merchandise. So he knows the entire time. When Chrisfield goes to attempt to take this merchandise, Slim has the guys from the organization meet him there, and then they follow him home and finds out where he has his narcotics, and then that's when all of the ruckus begins to happen.
All right. But ultimately, Slim is a criminal who gives back. How so?
Okay, so like he's like helping organizations around the city, like he's building like civic centers, he's redoing parks, he's helping people, people that can't pay their light bills and different things like that. Kind of like taking a lot of the money and being charitable with it.
Is he tied up with any of the politicians in Louisiana?
Yes, he is.
What would a book from Louisiana be without little political action in there, little corruption?
Exactly. You have to sprinkle that within it.
That sounds terrible.
Right?
But all that gritty, like the Big Easy, like any gritty book that the mobsters that have come out of Louisiana, like there's always that connection. I kind of feel bad for Louisiana, but I guess it makes for some great reading.
Yeah, it definitely does. And it's almost to be expected.
Yeah, but you say there is a message here, right?
There is definitely a message in it. So basically, when you read this, you'll get a lot of insight about about working hard and being consistent and being kind at the same time, no matter what you're doing. And then it also showed that every monetary gain is not a good monetary gain, but that still does not have to stop you from being a good person. And I guess it shows consequences and repercussions to every situation.
I got to know, where'd you get the name Louisiana Slim?
They call me Slim because I was very skinny, and I'm from Louisiana.
Well, there you go. So where do you leave us at the end of this book?
Oh, it's definitely a cliffhanger. They're going to be like waiting to see what happens next to Slim.
So more to come.
It's definitely going to be part of a series. I've written part 2 already. When I saw the traction that I was getting from this one, I wrote part 2.
How you getting traction?
I talk about it on Instagram and TikTok here and there, and I tend to put it in my story a lot. Or anytime I'm live or anything, I talk about it. That's how I get the traction to it. Like, for example, if I'm on a like maybe a streamer's live stream, or if I'm in an interview for myself, for my work, if I'm in any type of interview, I bring the books with me, and I'll give like the interviewer a signed copy, or sometimes the interviewer will read a page or two from it to the live stream, and live streams have like 30, 40, 50,000 people in it, and I guess that's how they then go and attempt to purchase it.
All right, and we find you where?
My social media handle and everything is I am Jason Love.
I just I am Jason loved you, and your Instagram is amazing.
Oh, thank you.
You have 672,000 followers. You have fashion, you have fitness, you have your book, you have collaborations, you have cooking with love. You have travel.
I do a lot of things. That's what I was telling you. Well, I was too modest.
Yeah, you're pretty modest. And basically, you're a social media influencer.
Yes, that is correct.
All right. And that's why you're getting interviewed. That's why you're getting all this attention.
Yes, that is correct.
All righty. And you are a man of few words.
That's just how I am. I'm more of a thinker. I find words are the most powerful thing that you have in this world, so I try not to waste as many, so I use the ones necessary.
All right. Well, listen, thank you. And good luck with your book.
Thank you ever so much.
Randall Hoover might be the last guy you'd ever expect to write a sci-fi novel entitled The Ghost of Nakagusuku. For one, because of the work he does for some of America's largest defense contractors.
Well, I've been a proposal manager, which means I do technical writing for government contracts. So I'm not afraid of writing. I've been writing for 25 years or more government work, and back in college, I used to write term papers for Beer and Money, and so yeah, been kind of writing for a long time. In fact, some of the owners of very large companies in this town used to knock on my dorm. That's sort of the genesis of my writing career. Although in between college and then becoming a proposal manager, I did spend 20 years in the Marine Corps, so I try to put that flavor into the setting of my books.
So is this book based on an experience that you had?
Well, it does have elements of my experience. The main character is a young United States Marine. I spent many years in Japan, so I found it to be extremely interesting. So I've tried to combine the elements of the Marine Corps and a American Marine being in Japan. So it is a combination of some of my life experiences. The main character, name is Artemis Jones, and he was stationed on Okinawa. The culture is new to him. He's a sergeant. He hasn't been in the military that long, so even the military itself is kind of a learning experience for him. And instead of living on base, he's given the opportunity to move off base, which is, in a Japanese culture, kind of a fascinating thing to do because there's a whole new set of circumstances that come around when you're not living on base in a barracks. You're moved off base and living in the Japanese economy. And because he doesn't have a lot of money, he's a sergeant, he ends up with an old house that was converted from like a garden shed into a house. And somebody took ownership of it, put some paint on it, and said, okay, let's rent it to an American. And so this is where he encounters a 600-year-old Japanese ghost. And because the ghost already lives there and sort of resents his being in the house. And this is not just a normal ghost. The ghost is in Japan. They have 7 different types of ghosts, and this is a Yurai, which is basically it's a ghost born of some kind of a revenge. And so this ghost has a revenge against something, and as it turns out, their lives sort of intertwine, and eventually they do end up communicating with one another, and that's where the story goes. I mean, who wouldn't like to communicate with the supernatural, right?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
and it's everybody's kind of fantasy, but we keep it in a plausible way. I mean, what would a ghost in a young man communicate about? And so, especially if they're from different cultures and don't speak the same language. So it's that whole cultural difference, as well as, one 600 years older than the other. And so it becomes kind of kind of a, I think a fun read. It's not War and Peace. It's just sort of a fun read, where the reader is taken, I consider every book I read it's like a vacation. It takes me to a new setting, a new place, and a new experience. And so I've tried to take the reader to, okay, here's what the Marine's like if it's not like war. I mean, this wasn't about a Marine at war. This is about, what we do on base when we're not at war. And how they live, and the little day-to-day, trials and tribulations that exist in the military. But unless you've been in the military or the Marine Corps specifically, you wouldn't have any idea. So it's kind of a setting in itself.
Right.
And if you've never been to Japan or Okinawa, which is part of Japan, where this story takes place, it also gives you a flavor of what it's like to be on Okinawa, and the young Marine learning about the differences in their cultures and so on and so forth. So
Is there any conflict in the book? Do they face a common enemy? Can this ghost see what he's doing day to day?
as a matter of fact, there is a conflict. That's why the ghost is a vengeful ghost who starts out, taking revenge on some of, I guess, the people that are in the district where the ghost lives. The ghost feels it's their mission to protect this area. And of course, that happens to be the area where this little house is. And so the police get interested by proximity in this new resident. And so the police are interested in this young sergeant as a possible suspect. And of course, because the ghost that lives in this house, it's that general area where things are occurring. So they become entwined with a yakuza type mystery, and so that's interesting. That's the mafia of Japan. So they're the bad guys, so to speak.
Oh.
And so it gives a little flavor of well, anybody that's ever been to upstate New York knows about, okay, the mafia. I'm from an Italian town up there. 80% of everybody pretends they're descended from from somebody that was in organized crime. Some of them maybe, but you never ever doubt them. But
So tell me about Nakagusku.
Nakagusku is a castle in Okinawa, Japan. And so, because it's a castle, and that's where the ghost grew up, in that castle, and the setting takes place right next to that castle. And I've seen it. I've run by there when I was in the Marine Corps. I used to was one of my favorite running courses.
Wow.
So I describe it. That has some unique aspects. They just to give you a flavor of one of those aspects. The road to the hill where Nakagusku Castle is has telephone poles with spiders in between the wires. The spiders are as big as dinner plates, and there's thousands of them. And
No.
they're just 10 feet above your head, because that's where and when you run up it, I mean, you know, you could see a little spider, maybe not be afraid, but when you see one the size of a dinner plate and there's
Yeah.
thousands of them just floating in the webs, a little ways above your head, they're the only place in the world I've ever seen these huge spiders like that. And it kind of makes your stomach kind of
That's kind of
full of
scary right there. Forget about the ghost.
Yeah, it is, and so the whole book really talks about either discovering new things, overcoming your fears or your reluctance, and things like that. And it's not again, it's not War and Peace, but it's kind of a like a slice of life. I've established it over a 1 year period of time, because typically when a Marine gets stationed somewhere, it's for 1 year at a time. So I've
Right.
I've taken that slice of time, and and to give the reader a flavor of where it is. Anyway, I like writing, and sometimes I like reading too. And in fact, this is part of the reasons why I haven't published more. Is it has to meet my own standard before I will, and I guess I have a very demanding standard. Now, sometimes if I read a book that I've read 2 chapters, this is crap, and I put it down. I get mad, and I won't write one like that. And so it has to be something that I myself would enjoy reading. Although now that I've read it so many times through proofreading and stuff like that,
I
okay,
know that's
I've kind
killer.
of read it to death. But it's I try to make a fun story, a fun read.
All right.
Myself, I like to read detective novels. So I and but I like to write science fiction because I don't want to write the same thing that I read. I want to guard against that. I don't want to accidentally take somebody else's idea.
Right.
In fact, I was right. I was about 3 chapters into a book when they made the movie Avatar, and I said, "Well, darn, that's my idea."
Oh, geez, they
That's
took it.
right. So I said, "Well, heck with that one."
Ghosts were reading your mind. That's what I think happened. Well,
Well, yeah, well, that's his name James Cameron was, I
I
guess, or
guess.
whoever wrote the story behind Avatar. But so I says, well, okay, and that was just not that it wasn't that original. It was something similar though. It was similar enough where that I thought that it would sound like I was
Right.
just stealing the man's idea,
Right.
and I couldn't do that. Not in good conscience.
So there's more books, right?
I've probably started 7 or 8 books over the last 10 years,
Wow.
and so this one. As I developed the book, it kept seeming interesting to me. In fact, once it seems interesting, I just let it go to the next step. Well, what else would be interesting, or what would where does this story go? Sometimes they write themselves. In this case, it did kind of write itself as I sat down and I would think about a what if situation,
Mhm.
or a what is the path not taken. And if I see something that I like or that I think is funny, I'll say, well, what if this happened instead? And sometimes it just catches it amuses me, and so I'll say, well, then what would be the next step? And from there, what's the step after that? And then if a story starts to emerge, I will, I'll start working with it, and that's really where this story came from, is a kind of a what if scenario. So I'll just start with an event, and then step by step, just sort of build it. I'll take it chapter by chapter. I find that for creative writing, the outline, other than maybe a skeletal outline, and I'm talking about, okay, where are you going to take it? So I'll put down notional, chapter headings, and sometimes they don't even work out because the story takes a left turn before it gets to that heading. But I'll set out a notional goal for it. But I find if I get too detailed, because I've tried that, and it made it sound kind of dry and
Right.
uninteresting. And so I just said, well, let's just take it where the imagination will go. And I guess because I try to write science fiction, or plausible science fiction is what I like to call it. I like to ask the reader to accept just one thing as being true. And in this case, that ghosts exist, and already probably half the world believes they do. And if that's the case, then what could logically happen from there? I don't expect superpowers to develop or anything like that. It always frustrates me when I see some brand new thing emerge in the middle of a novel that wasn't there. Just one thing, if I was to pick, invisibility, if that were true, I wouldn't, develop new things. I would just, say, okay, what are the plausible? And I've seen some very good movies and books that describe some of the problems you'd have if you were
Right,
invisible.
right, right, right.
So I think that I just try a plausible thing that someone would believe, and then from there, uh, I like to see where it goes. And sometimes it goes pretty well, sometimes it doesn't. But
Yeah, well, you won't know if you don't try, right? What a process. Well, listen, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
okay, great.
Your book sounds really good. It sounds really interesting. Those spiders, though, boy.
Well, yeah, that is a little part of it, and there's a number of interesting things that happen in the book that will make you smile if you read it. Eventually this may become a retirement plan for me, but for now I just kind of like to see if I could have a little bit of success with it.
Well, I sure hope you do.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye bye.
Bye.
A member of the federal workforce for almost 4 decades, the title of Jorge Y. Ponce's book really says it all. Examining the past to understand the present, the journey of a Cuban American refugee, and what led to his conversion from Democrat to Republican. Jorge, you say you are not alone in your defection.
I think that is happening a lot for the simple reason that today's Democrats are different than past Democrats. Today's Democrats have a socialist ideology, and therefore most Americans, when they go to the voting booth in 2024, most likely will only have one alternative to choose from, uh, and that would be the Republicans.
Okay.
That is if they want to make their vote count. I'm sure there will be some independents, but seriously, they only have one choice if they don't like what's happening in the country right now. I divided the book into 5 parts. Part 5 has 60 handpicked articles written about all subjects that have moved my soul, and that includes politics. But in addition to politics, I've written about topics like civil rights, philosophy, religion, Hispanic representation in the federal workforce. So anything that moved my mojo. Uh, the I had 2 inspirations for writing the book. Uh, Charles Krauthammer, the late Charles Krauthammer, wrote a book, Things That Matter. He also wrote a book about a list of his articles. The difference being that Charles was a public figure and a regular contributor to several TV networks, whereas I am not a public figure. So I decided when writing the book to tell my readers about my life story so they could get a feel for who I am and what led to my conversion.
Okay. So when did you come to the United States?
I came with my family legally as political refugees in 1966.
Okay.
So practically all my life in the United States, although the 11 years that I spent in Cuba left good memories before Castro took over in 1959, as well as bad memories after Castro reached power. But my parents and my parents' generation were Republicans because they saw the failure of the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961 when John F. Kennedy was in the White House as a betrayal of the Cuban Americans' aspirations to restore freedom to Cuba. Because of that reason, they lean more Republican. That's my parents' generation.
Okay.
On the other hand, when I became politically savvy, I lean more towards the Democratic side for the simple reason that when we came in 1966, we took advantage of the Freedom Flights, which was a program that was set up by President Lyndon Johnson, who was a Democrat. So I thought that I owed a debt of gratitude to the Democratic Party for that reason. But having said that, Alice, when I became a Democrat, my parents and my parents' friends were angry at me because being a Democrat was considered to be an anomaly within the Cuban American society. When I became a Republican in 2014, Obama was in the White House. A lot of my Democrat friends were angry at me. But, I keep saying to all of them that life is a journey and you change as you become exposed to different ideas, different philosophers, different politicians. And if you remain the same, static, you're a very boring person who's not in tune with what's happening out there. And furthermore, I also bring to a lot of them who criticize me for becoming a Republican. I said, hey, keep in mind that we have recent past presidents who were Democrats at one time. President Ronald Reagan and President Donald Trump were at one time Democrats. So they claim, just as I do, that the Democratic Party left them. They did not leave the party. The Democratic Party left them. And that says it all.
So what was the turning point for you?
There were three things that triggered the conversion. The first one, I was fully aware of my parents' anger at the Bay of Pigs fiasco in 1961. President Kennedy was a Democrat. The second one was when President Bill Clinton was in the White House, and he returned Elian Gonzalez to Cuba, despite the fact that his mother had perished in a raft trying to get Elian to the United States. So that was strike number two, to use a baseball analogy. Strike number three, and the most crucial one, was in December 2014 when President Obama reached out an olive branch to the Cuban government, reestablished the embassies without requiring any human rights concessions. In other words, he was giving a lot of economic benefits, a lot of trade benefits to Cuba. Cuba was not giving anything back to the United States, so the United States was negotiating from a position of strength. And I thought that it was unthinkable that President Obama did not exercise his strength to require human rights concessions.
I can understand that. I definitely can understand that. What is your motivation? What is it that you want the reader to do? To just think about these things?
What I want the readers to get from the book,
several things. Number one, I indicated that my inspiration was Charles Krauthammer's book, where he wrote all these articles. To find out what led to my conversion from a Democrat to a Republican. Number two, I want to get the message across that today's Democrats have a socialist agenda where they want to undermine the founding principles of the United States. They want to undermine the Judeo-Christian principles, foundations of this country. And if they love this country for what it stood for in the past and what they want the country to stand for going forward as a land of freedom, a land of liberty, a land of democracy, and they want to make their vote count when they go to the voting booth in 2024, I think that the only choice, the only alternative they have is to vote for Republicans.
Specifically Donald Trump or any Republican?
I myself voted for Donald Trump in 2016 and 2020. I will vote for whoever the Republican nominee is. If it's Donald Trump, I'll vote for Donald Trump again. If it's Ron DeSantis, my governor, whom I love dearly for the excellent job that he's done governing the state of Florida, then I'll vote for Governor DeSantis. But I think it is incumbent for Americans who love what this country of ours stands for is to vote for Republicans.
Okay.
In the Oval Office to regain control, Republican control of the Senate, and to keep Republican control in the House of Representatives.
All right, Jorge. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We hope to see you back here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.